Hello and welcome to another episode of Launch Legends. Today we are speaking with Steve of Badger Mapping. Badger Mapping started in 2012 and currently does $4 million in revenue and over 3,500 customers. Steve deep dives into how he remotely manages 4 offices based in San Francisco, Utah, Spain, and Philippines. He talks about the problems with remote management and how to overcome them to run operations efficiently. But before we go ahead, if you're listening to this on a podcast, please rate and review. If you're watching this on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button and leave a review. Hey, Steve, thank you very much for coming on the show. So, CEO of Badger Mapping, you're the number one app in the App Store for sales, field sales. MBA from Stanford. I know you guys have about 3,500 customers and you're doing about $4 million in revenue. But before we talk about anything else, let's talk about who you are. And why did you start Badger Mapping?
Sure. Yeah. I guess the reason I started Badger was my whole background was in field sales, and I guess I had originally so I knew a lot about the problems that field salespeople face, and as a result, when I was at Google and I was working very closely with the mapping API that they have and Android. And I could kind of see how I could use mobile and mobile mapping to be a platform to solve a bunch of problems that field salespeople had. And so in January 2012, I started Badger.
Got it. And let's talk about, you started Badger, but let's talk about the product growth. How long before you actually launched the product and what kind of problems did you face?
Well, I guess, it's always challenging to build a piece of software and get something out the door that's good enough that people can use it and they're willing to pay for it. Mm-hmm. I guess we had something that we could sell about a year in, but it was pretty basic. Basically, we were taking, it only worked on the browser, only in Chrome and only in the browser. Didn't work on the mobile devices yet. Mm-hmm. But we basically could just take a salesperson's customers and lay them out on a map. Mm-hmm. And next we got the ability to colorize those and then filter those. Then we got the ability to build routes out and optimize those routes. Uh-huh. And really... We were able to get our first big customers just with the ability to colorize the points on a map and filter them. So it was about January 2014, we did our first $300K deal, and that was with a big dental company, and they have field sales reps that go and sell stuff to dentists, and they had some challenges around helping to figure out which types of customers they should have their sales reps focus on. And so we were able to connect with their CRM system and solve that problem. But it was really a pretty basic product at that time. The product didn't really do everything we wanted it to do until 2017. And also work really well with no bugs and that sort of thing.
So from 2012 to 2014, did you have any customers at all, or you were still working with the beta users, trying to build as much as possible, get it to a point where it could be sellable?
Yeah, we had customers, but they were generally very small and they needed simpler things. By 2017, the product was kind of enterprise class. Mm-hmm. and could meet the needs. And, when people would ask us questions, the answer was yes, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Right. So, Steve, I really want to talk about I know you guys are doing extremely well with remote teams, and you're very good at that. So look, let's talk about how your company is structured right now.
Okay. So we've kind of we're not a remote first company, but we have 4 offices. So we've been dealing with a lot of the problems that companies are dealing with right now, being remote. We've been dealing with a lot of those problems for a while. So we have engineering team, well, mostly engineering, some sales, some customer success in product in Spain. Headquarters is in San Francisco. We have a sales and customer success team in Utah. And then we have an administrative team in the Philippines.
Right.
And so we've kind of been dealing with working and I've been working on managing people across all these different places for a long time.
So let's talk about that journey. How did you start and where did you end up in terms of, I'm sure you had lots of problems in the beginning where, I mean, I know myself, for me to manage remote teams, I find it very difficult. So let's talk about how you progress from the starting to the point where you can manage them properly.
Yeah, I think, there are cultural challenges and just, learning to work with people across different cultures. I think empathy challenges and really understanding what's actually going on the ground in far and away places. I think, there's training challenges and communication challenges. I think, there's a whole litany of reasons why it's challenging to manage remote teams. But I think, the way the world is globalizing, whether we had coronavirus or not, we're doing more and more working across cultures, across, a company often is across borders. And so it's something that I think it's important for everybody to kind of try to get good at it.
Great. So, Steve, let's talk about the day-to-day processes and systems you've put in place to run a very efficient system with the remote teams. Let's talk about them. What kind of processes do you have?
Well, I think we use the platform that we mostly use to collaborate is the Google Apps platform. So, emails and we have regular meetings in place for different people who are working together on different things. I think some of the more important processes is to help people, empower people to kind of control their own workload and control what they're doing and make decisions. It's really hard to centralize all the decisions if you're in a remote environment, because it's really hard to kind of understand what is really going on the ground level in a place that you're not in. So I think it's really important to empower the leadership in these places that are far and wide, and empower the people that are there to make those decisions.
Right. Could you give me one example where you were probably not getting the results you wanted, and then instead you just empowered the person, trained them, and they started delivering, or you started getting the results you wanted?
We were struggling with at one point with the product side and just kind of having it syncing with what engineering needed, and just kind of having everyone on the same page. And the answer there was just to move the person who was running product from San Francisco to Spain. And so the person that was running product just he moved to Spain for a year and a half, and then by being there for that amount of time, he was able to understand what was going on there and communicate that much better, and that really solved those communication issues and getting people on the same page.
Great. So what about now? What kind of training and coaching do you do?
Well, I think you've always got to be training and coaching, especially in these types of crazy times, right? The times of change, right? Mm-hmm. I think as a manager, you want to spend about half your time coaching and up-leveling your team's skills. Not that half your time should be spent, teaching class or anything, but just talking through things with people, debriefing, strategizing, joining them in meetings, doing specific coaching around a specific thing that people are doing right now. I mean, anything along those lines would count towards that 50% of your time should be spent kind of interacting and coaching rule of thumb. I think, in terms of what needs to be coached, it's really depending on the team, right? I mean, if our sales team, for example, is scattered all over the world, and that, and that makes that team harder to coach and really wrap your head around what they need to work on than like the engineering team where everyone's really in the same place already.
Right. I mean, you talked about leadership. Let's talk about that. How does that work in remote teams? How do you make sure that you empower someone and you make someone a great leader to deliver when they're in a remote environment?
Well, I think a remote environment it really gives you an opportunity to give people real responsibility, right? You can't control everything, even if you want to. So, a remote environment is probably the hardest type of environment to be a great leader. Yeah. But I think it's these remote environments that also need great leadership more than anything else, right? In particular, in the times we're having right now, right? Yeah. In a time of economic crisis, I think leaders need to really confront reality. They need to be action oriented. I think they need to be honest in their assessments of the challenges that face their organization. There's a lot of bad news floating around a lot of times these days, and you have to embrace that as a remote leader, and you have to ask the hard questions and figure out what's really going on. And at the same time, you need to maintain a positive outlook, right? You need to build an action plan and you really need to be transparent with your team about that plan and what that plan is.
Right. Okay.
And a team, you have to be responsive to your team's needs, right? And people are worried right now. They're worried about losing their jobs. They're worried about, how hard it's going to be to get another job. They're worried about their salaries going away or becoming smaller. So I think, it's easy to go silent if you're a remote leader, right? It's easy to just, hide behind your computer screen and email and not really engage. But I think you have to do the opposite to be a successful leader in a remote world. You have to get in front of your employees and ask them the questions, figure out what they need from you in the organization to be successful. And, you can try to figure out who's having success across the remote organization right now, and what the playbook was for that success, and then you can, with the help of that employee that figured out how to be successful, you can try to have them work with them to train the rest of the remote team and replicate that success across the organization.
Yeah. It's a great thing you said that. It's very easy to just hide behind your computer when you're in a remote environment where you probably just forget and probably think for a short while that, look, everything's fine. No one's really shouting anything. No one's coming to you with problems. So you might just get complacent yourself. And that's happened to me before. Do you have a weekly or daily routine where you do certain things where you know that they know you're there for them and they see you all the time?
I think frontline managers in a remote environment should have a daily stand-up, a remote daily stand-up with their team. Since I manage people that are managing people, I don't do that, but we meet, weekly as the management team to discuss stuff and kind of all stay on the same page. But yeah, I think, for some teams, it's not a bad idea to have 2 stand-ups a day. One at the beginning of the day to kind of get everyone on the same page, and then another one at the end of the day.
Yeah, we tried that, but I think the team found it too aggressive. So we had to dial it back to 1 stand-up a day. I think that worked for a while. So, Steve, let's talk about the KPIs. I think in a remote environment, tracking KPIs is extremely important. Where I think it's very easy to deviate from what you should be working on. So I'm guessing you have very strict KPIs in place.
Yeah, I think KPIs are a way that you communicate what's important to the organization, what direction things are sailing, and if you're going to empower people in the organization to make decisions, you have to kind of show them what yardstick that we're making decisions by, right?
Right. So what kind of KPIs?
I guess one thing to think about with KPIs right now is when you're remote, I think you can want to focus on different KPIs than when you're all in the same room, or certainly in a good economy versus a bad economy. In a good economy, and when things are stable, it's much easier to focus on what I call lagging APIs. So things like a lagging API, meaning like this KPI is reflective of what has happened in the past. Like revenue, for example, is a lagging API. Like the stuff that we did over the last 4 months determines our revenue here in November, right? And I think it can be really helpful when you're in this remote environment to switch to forward-looking APIs.
Right.
I'm sorry, KPIs, not APIs. Forward-looking KPIs, so you can kind of realign the company on metrics and the KPIs that really show what's going on in this month, in this week.
Right.
So, don't look at something like revenue, but instead look at something like activity-based KPIs can be really helpful in a remote environment. So like what has gotten done this week? If it was a marketing team, how many pieces of content did they create? Or how many, if it's a sales team, how many meetings resulted from the outbound calls this week? Yeah. So more around the what's happening right now. So I think that can be really helpful so if you can identify what do people need to be doing right now to create success in the future, and you can manage that. Now, there are some challenges with that too, because sometimes if you count certain things in the moment, you can get skewy results, right? So you can, like, if you're counting things other than revenue or profit for a sales team, for example, you can start counting non-revenue producing things like, qualified deals or proposals made, et cetera. And, you'll end up getting, if you only count things like proposals and only count forward-looking metrics, you're much more likely to get a whole bunch of proposals, and people will optimize themselves around that, but they won't necessarily be optimizing themselves around the revenue. So that's a challenge that you have to deal with too.
Great. So Steve, you've come really far with your remote management, but just imagine you're starting all over again, where you've got a bunch of people working in-house and you're going remote, and you know everything you know now. So imagine someone else is listening to this and they think, okay, we want to be Steve, where we want to go fully remote and we're managing things properly. What kind of strategies would you start with? What kind of things you would start with? Let's go step by step.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I think the first thing you have to do is if you're going remote, and there's different kinds of remote, right? There's remote, everyone's working from home, and there's also remote, everyone's in remote offices, but they're in an office. Mm-hmm. So if you're going with an office, if there's a remote office that you're opening up in Eastern Europe to do your engineering, and you get access to the great engineers that are over there.
Yeah,
I think it's hard. It's really hard to manage a team of engineers if the leader of the engineering team is in San Francisco, for example, mm-hmm. and that team is all in Bulgaria. I think it's important for the manager of that team to spend the majority of their time in Bulgaria. Yeah. So, you can hire someone local or you can send someone from your main office to that place. But I think someone does have to be on the ground managing that team. Yeah. Now, if it's fully a remote team, then and people are truly scattered everywhere, then the geography of the management team obviously doesn't matter, but you've got to really put a lot of structure in place around how are we communicating with people? How are we interacting with people? How are we listening to what they need to be successful on a daily, weekly basis?
Right. So let's imagine you have 15 engineers working for you, all different places, all working from home. What kind of structure would you put in place? I fully agree with you that if you have all your engineers, maybe say in Bulgaria or Czech Republic, then someone from your San Francisco team should go down and just work alongside them and make sure they're fully trained, figure out what their problems are. That's probably the easiest thing to do. But if you have 15 engineers working from home from all over the world, that's when it becomes a lot more difficult. How would you set up the structure with that?
Well, we use Agile and sprints to kind of do that at our company. But we spend a lot of time kind of figuring out what people are going to be working on next, right? There's a lot of meetings and thinking things through and coordinating the different pieces. Yeah. I think there are a lot of frictions for certain types of jobs that go along with being a fully remote team. But I think it's important to keep everyone on the same page and put the structure in place that there are these kind of regular communication, regular ways to communicate and kind of keep track of everything that's going on. Mm-hmm. But it's, for some jobs, it's not that hard to coordinate remotely. For others, it's extremely difficult. So, and I think the more people are reliant on each other, the more, meetings you have to have and kind of clear delineation you have to have and communication.
Right. So one question I've been asking myself is, working from an office has its benefits. One of those being building the culture, where you can actually really control the culture. You can really make sure you can keep an eye on it and make sure that everything is running fine. People are happy. They are motivated. They're working with each other, collaborating well. How would you do that for a remote team where you've got 15 people working from all over the place? How do you build culture then?
I think that's hard. It's onboarding new people is really hard remotely. It's just a different culture than you can have in person. I think it's harder to build relationships. We've been doing some game playing, but I think it's, if you're permanently remote, it's going to have the company will have a different feel than if you are, in an office. A different culture will develop, different types of camaraderie. I mean, I think, and it's still, that's very attractive to some certain types of people, I think. I mean, we're planning on going back to the offices here, hopefully next summer. Mm-hmm. But I think it's, we've been kind of leaning on the culture that we already had during these remote times. Yeah. But it's if you're truly a remote first culture, it's just going to feel different than if you weren't, I think. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Right. But there's less camaraderie and less, I guess, friendship in the office, I think, if people are all remote.
Exactly.
Which some people like.
Yeah, but I've been thinking all these big companies like Twitter, they're like, people can work from home forever. I'm not sure if they've actually thought through what's going to happen after a couple of years where everyone's just doing their own thing and they don't really have a culture. And I don't know, maybe they might have some strategy, but I question whether that's the right decision or not. Maybe there has to be some kind of hybrid solution where they can work from home, they can work from the office, or they meet frequently, some kind of thing. I don't know. Maybe there's a way. We all need to figure that out. What other strategies could you have in place to make sure that you have a real remote, working environment doing really well?
Well, other strategies to have a remote team. I guess I think you have to have communication be really easy. So Slack's great. The Google Apps Suite is great. But I think it's important that people get to know each other to some degree, and you want to have strategies around that. So you want to have you want to set things up so that people can interact and can have fun in a remote environment too. Or else I think it becomes a drag if you can't ever have any fun, right?
Yeah.
So and this is a challenging time right now, obviously, but but I think there are a lot of companies that will always be remote first, and that's become a trend that's more and more common. So if that is I think I'm in terms of like building a culture. I think it's just a different kind of culture. That's the thing I would stress is people are going to know each other less well than if they're in an office together. Sure. And it becomes more about the work at hand than it becomes about, some work environments, the work environment is mostly about the people that are there, right? Like I think that's what motivates certain people to come every day and put in their best. It's about the team. It's about the people that are there. Yeah. And if people aren't regularly meeting each other, that's very hard. I think you can get everyone together a couple times a year, rent an Airbnb or something, and have everyone work out of the same place to kind of build those relationships and meet for dinner, et cetera. Yeah. It's challenging though. I mean, especially if everyone's all over the world, right? Yeah. But we do a lot of moving people around. So the people from the Spain office will come and visit the Salt Lake office. People in the Salt Lake office will come visit the Spain office. Mm-hmm. Any of the American employees can spend a month or two in Spain every year, and we have apartments over there that they can stay in, and they really enjoy that. They have a lot of fun doing that, and it's that's I think deepened relationships across these places, and vice versa. The people from the Spain office will come stay here. We've got an apartment in San Francisco and one in Utah. And so we're able to kind of mix everyone together and get together for events. We have an annual event where we get everyone together for, this year we'll be doing that remotely, but, I think that stuff's important for people to really get to know each other.
Yeah, that actually kind of reminds me of one thing. I was interviewing a candidate fresh out of college, and very bright. And one of the conditions was that they had an offer from a couple of other companies, and all of them offered work from home forever. And they took that as a perk. So I was thinking, that's a kid, right? That he needs to go out, he needs to meet people, he needs to learn from his, elders, senior people. If he's just going to work from home forever, and he's going to start his career working from home, and wherever he's going to go, the other company, I didn't hire him, they've offered him work from home forever. So what is he going to learn? How's his career going to progress over time? Because he will never pick up those skills you only get from working alongside great people.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. If you are in a remote only situation and it's going to be that way for a while or forever, I think you need to work on having that type of mentoring. You have to work on setting that up and putting the infrastructure in place so that people do mentor the next generation at your company. That's important.
Yeah. So Steve, thank you very much. One last question. So I'm probably reiterating myself. How do you see this whole remote working playing out in the next 5 years, especially with the COVID that's come about?
I suspect that most companies will go back to work and be in offices again after there's a vaccine out. Mm-hmm. That's my guess. I think that the companies that And when you look at who's really committed to long-term working from home and working only remotely, I think a lot of those companies, they often sell something that enables that. So it's like, sure, Slack says you can work remotely forever, or Zoom thinks you can do that, or Microsoft thinks you can do that. The companies that are saying, yeah, we could all work remotely forever and never leave our bedrooms. I think a lot of times there's the companies that are saying that, there's a reason for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I doubt that we're going to figure out that working remotely forever is a great fit for most companies.
Yeah.
Now, I think it can work sometimes on a long-term basis, but you have to be very thoughtful about it.
Yeah.
But on the balance, I think people will be back in offices.
Yeah, I think my gut feeling is that there's going to be probably some hybrid solution where it's going to be a combo of working from home and working from office, that kind of stuff. I think that's probably the most logical thing that's going to happen. Anyway, Steve, thank you very much for coming on the show, and I hope I can speak to you very soon again. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me.